This is David Gasper, class of 1974. He is the former president, entrepreneur, and developer of ATM management software. He had his own business, Gasper Corporation, and he can tell you a little bit more about his life. Thank you so much.
You're quite welcome. Good morning. Just a little bit of unusual times here, so we'll kind of work through lunch, and I'm in my home office, so I'm fortunate enough I don't have to wear a mask right now, so it makes it a little bit easier for me. As Ms. Weiss mentioned, I'm a Carroll High School graduate. I'm also a Wright State and University of Dayton graduate, so I'm pretty local. I was mentioning early too that one of the things I did a few years ago when I was still able to play basketball is I'd go to some open gyms and I would play basketball against Mr. Ramsey when he was a student at Carroll High School. And let me tell you, he was an outstanding basketball player. And I think he's become quite a great teacher for you at Carroll. I don't know if any of you have had him for his classes, but he is really, he's an awesome person. So what I was going to do today was I was going to take a couple minutes and talk to you about some of the things that I learned through my career that I found very important to me. And some of them started at Carroll and some of them started before. And it applies in today's day and age. So I'll bring some of that up to date, is depth of thinking and width of thinking. Okay. And what I find today is that you have an advantage that I didn't have when I started out, where you have the internet, which has lots of information, but it also has lots of misinformation and disinformation. And so it's really, really important for you to be able to decipher through information properly. And I'm going to give you 3 to 4 examples of that. So I ran a company called Gasper Corporation. We were a software development house. We were actually located not far from Carroll, over in Apple Valley Business Park by 675 and 35. And we had about almost 100 employees. We made specialized software that managed automatic teller machines. Well, at one point in time, our internal network started running very, very slow. And we had a systems engineer who walked in my office one day and he put down this spec sheet for this brand new monster server. And he said, here's the problem with us. This is going to make our network run so much faster. And this is just this big, expensive monstrosity of a machine. And I could have taken that at face value, but instead, I started to question a little bit. So because our network was running slow, but the server itself internally was running pretty quickly. So that really didn't make sense. Why are we replacing this entire network or server just for this network issue? So I asked him to explain a little more. And then at one point in time, I asked him a question. And sometimes in this depth of thinking, you have to just do some common sense things. So I said, look, this thing costs more than a year's salary of your salary. Would you put this inside your home? And the guy goes, absolutely. I'd put it in my own living room. And immediately there, the bells went off that this just doesn't make sense whatsoever. That's more than a year's salary, and you spend it on a server, put your own room. So I said, no, you go back and look again. And 2 days later, he came in and he hands me his notice and says, I can't work for a company that doesn't have any faith in me whatsoever. And so he quit and walked out the door, after giving his notice. And the day after he leaves, one of our software developers walks in my office. He puts a board on my desk and says, here's your answer. And I said, well, Jim, what is this? And he says, our network was running slow because we had pinched all the traffic through one network card. All we had to do was add a simple network card, less than $100, and we solved our problem. So if I took face value without doing any depth of thinking, I would have spent thousands and thousands of dollars to solve a problem that $100 problem could have solved. And the agenda that the software engineer had was, hey, look, he's spending my money, not his. So, and he's enamored with technology and he wanted to all his bells and whistles, and that's great. But it's a valuable lesson to learn in terms of, when you're confronted with information, just ask some probing questions and look for things that don't make sense, for the disconnects. I'll give you another example. There was a company that I work with here, and they had this PhD guy that was really brilliant, named Robert Klein. He wrote several books based on his research that he did for the military, where they wanted to have him learn how to diagnose decision making under duress, so they could come up with better ways in which people under duress could make better decisions. So one of the first things he did was he went up to Cleveland and he studied firefighters, and the firefighters in Cleveland talked about this one guy who had special knowledges. He had ESP, they said, where he could see things that other couldn't. So he's magical. So Dr. Klein investigated this again, asked probing questions, didn't take it at face value, but said, "Well, what's behind this?" And they told him a story about one day these firefighters are all in this building, and they don't see anything. It looks just perfectly fine. And all of a sudden, this guy goes, everybody out now." They all clear out, and within seconds, moments of that, the floor collapsed, and a raging fire underneath was burning and collapsed the floor. If they'd stayed there just moments later, they all would have died. They would have all fallen into a fire. So they thought this guy was magical because none of the others understood that. Well, Dr. Klein realized, no, he wasn't magical. He didn't have ESP. What he had was experience and intuition, and his experience taught him to question things. And what he questioned was, firefighters are taught when you get an experience, you get something that doesn't make sense, the first thing you do is retreat. Think about the firefighters in California, how the winds thing to do is if you're retreating the other way, exactly what you should do, used his intuition and backed him out and saved a lot of different lives. So, and those are things that I started actually getting during my experience at Carroll High School, was learning how to really do depth of thinking. So stop taking things at face value and start asking probing questions. Really paid off a lot for me in my personal life and business career. So you're going to be confronted with lots of information like that through your lives that you're going to have to dissect through. And the key is going to be things that don't make sense and things that are face value. Try and understand a little more of those. So I want to stop with some of that and see if there's any questions that you have so far.
Do you have advice for a student trying to get into college?
Yeah, that there, one of the advantages you have is that Carroll has just an outstanding college prep program. In fact, when I first went to Wright State, I found some of the very first classes easier than the classes I had at Carroll High School. And that made it tough, tough for me. I think my opinion is college is going to be the best time of your life. You don't have responsibilities. You meet a lot of new people. There's a lot of freedoms that you have. Like for instance, when you go to college, your first semester, you're going to find out you don't have to show up for class. But as opposed to Carroll's going to, the next, if you miss a class at Carroll, they're going to be calling your home, et cetera. They're going to be finding out where you're at. You go to college, and the professor says, "Hey, look, you show up for class. Good for you. If you don't, I'll just flunk you. It doesn't matter." So it's up to you. So you have a lot more freedom and responsibility than you have for now. So trying to get into college, it's the big things I would say is try and figure out and do a little homework, depth of research. What colleges are going to match with what your interests are. Some colleges have great reputations for pre-med, for liberal arts, for engineering, for software engineering, for education. So look at the ones that match closely to what you have. The other suggestion I would have, and I had a real advantage over you, was that college was a lot more affordable when I went than you are now. So be very, very careful about college loans. College loans are scary to me because the interest rates are higher than normal. You're paying interest for dorms, and you're getting college loans for those things, and you're going to be burdened with a lot of college debt coming out. If you graduate from Wright State's medical school, the typical med school student graduates with over $200,000 in debt to begin with, and they're going to be paying interest rates a lot higher than anybody's paying on a home mortgage or whatnot. So do your homework on which colleges you have. For everybody, it's a very personal choice. Do you also want to leave Dayton? Do you want to get out of town? Do you want to stay close at home? Look at your finances, and then look at what your majors are, and then also try and use faculty references. Talk to your favorite teachers, because a lot of colleges want a reference from faculty members. And so make sure you use those, and then demonstrate your college, because sometimes you can't always get in the one you want. Demonstrate why you would be a great student. The final thing I would say is have a great time in college, but also take it seriously. My dad said, "You're going to go to college, and I'm not going to pay for it." And it made it really rough on me, and I had to make some sacrifices because of that. But I will tell you that I showed up for class on Monday morning, and there were people in my class who really didn't take it seriously, and they were partying too much on the weekends. They were showing up sometimes hungover on Monday mornings even. And I took my classroom very seriously. And when I started my business career, I actually would compete against people who had less business skills because I learned, for me, it was marketing, accounting, business management. A number of those things really gave me advantage in my career that helped me out quite a bit.
What are you the most proud of professionally?
You know, what I'm really proud of is that I built a company in which people years after I left the company are still proud to be part of that organization that had ethics, that had honor to that, that um, um, treated people with dignity. I'll tell one example was um, this is probably a very interesting moment in terms of management. And this is understanding like depth and trying to understand situations. Was we tried to treat people very fairly, and we had an employee who developed a gaming addiction. And you got to remember that this was a number of years ago before all the online gaming that we've got now. And this was a brand new thing for us. I mean, we were used to, alcohol addiction or gambling addiction or something like that. We didn't know what gaming addiction was. And this was a software developer, local software developer. And we went through all the steps with him. So we gave him an oral warning, said, you need to step it up. You need to stop gaming because it's interfering with your work. Get your work done. Didn't make a difference. We gave him written warnings, with a notice that if you don't change his behavior and start being more productive, we're going to let you go. Didn't make a difference. We ended up firing him. I wasn't even aware of it because of where he was in the organization. 3 weeks later, he sends me an email. He says, I'd like to have my job back. So I was perplexed by it. So what I did was I brought his manager in, his manager's manager, and the head of our human resources. And I asked them about this. I said, what should I do? And their recommendation was all ignore it. We gave him every chance they had, and he never turned it around. And so now I had a dilemma because I wasn't certain, but I saw something none of them did. And how do you explain to them without ordering people to do things? And the thing was, I had to question for them. This guy could get a job anywhere else. Software developers were, just in hot demand. You could get a job anywhere. Why would he come back with the humiliation that everyone around here knew he was fired, why he was fired, et cetera? Why would he come back to that same organization and ask for a chance when we'd given him every chance that he deserved and then some? Why would he do that? And so I asked them to just contact him. I wasn't going to contact him. I asked them to contact him and ask him that question. And they were upset with me. And I had to deal with the concern that thought maybe I was overriding their authority and overriding their decisions. But I didn't tell them to rehire him. I said, just ask him that question. So they did. They went back and they asked him a question. And whatever he did, he was very, very convincing to them. And they said, look, okay, you convinced us that you've bottomed out, you've turned around. We're going to give you another chance. You really don't deserve it. We're going to give you another one. But we're going to watch you like a hawk. Our HR person start really researching gaming addiction. We're going to monitor your computer usage, et cetera. And first slip up, you're out of here. And he stayed with the organization and became incredibly valuable for about 15 years after that. And then he took a job with Amazon. So, you know, when you talk about something that is really proud of, it was the way we treated people. And at the end of the day, I hope nobody's going to make a movie about me that's like Scrooge: A Christmas Carol, right? Where you treated everybody. So, you want to be successful in business, but you also want to keep you really take good care of and treat people with dignity and ask them to treat you with dignity as well.
Do you want to tell them a little bit about college?
So I went to Wright State, and some of it was that um, I looked at going to other universities. I looked at Ohio State, Miami, University of Dayton offered me a scholarship, and the amount of their scholarship still made the tuition 2, 3, 4 times what it was at Wright State. Um, I had a great experience at Wright State because I had just some incredible professors. Actually, 1 or 2 of them I'm still friends with now that just really made a big difference in my life. And what I found was having really educators who are in touch with you, who give you a personal touch, really does make a difference if you can embrace what they provide to you, because there's a lot of wisdom that you've gotten from the faculty at Carroll, and you'll also get as college. Now, was there some sacrifices there because I didn't go away from home? So I lived with my brother and I lived with my sister for a while. So, I didn't live in dorms. So I missed having part of that dorm life, which is pretty cool. And, that's one part, I had a regret about. But, I also really, really valued and took a while for the education. And like I say, um, it took me a little bit to uh, get started on that, because your first year academically is always a tough adjustment because you don't have anybody looking over your shoulder, and you're going to be pushed harder just like you are. you know um, you think about it, your career, Carol, your sophomore classes should have been harder than your freshman classes. Your junior classes should have been harder than your sophomore classes. When you go to college, there will be a big leap, and you're going to be around some really smart individuals. The one thing I'd really say is make sure that you get in with the right crowds at college and not the wrong crowds. You can be corrupted by the wrong groups in college, and make sure you get, especially get around. That's the other thing, is get around bright people. Here's another reason why I like Wright State so much. I went to college with a bunch of Vietnam veterans. You may say, why was that really cool? Well, because they were a lot more mature and experienced. They had seen things I had never seen. And, and I'd also ask them about the Vietnam War, and they would tell me some interesting and sometimes chilling, type things about it. But they were also very hard workers. And I made a point of being around them because they were great examples to follow through. And so, make sure that you get in with the right crowd when you go to college, wherever it is. And by the way, you can live in dorms and be away from home, and and be in with the right crowd. And you can live at home. I know students in the Dayton area who go to Wright State, UD, and Sinclair, and can still be in the wrong crowd. So, and what I'm talking about, the right crowd, is the people who are focused on academics, who want to be successful no matter what they want to be. And success has different definitions for a lot of different people, but that's what you really want to shoot for.
What do they need to know to become an entrepreneur?
An entrepreneur is somebody who wants to work 60 hours a week for themselves instead of working 40 hours a week for somebody else. So an entrepreneur needs to do several things. One is you need to develop business skills. So if you're going to be an entrepreneur, make sure you learn accounting and marketing, especially, and management of people. Those are the 3 biggest things. Marketing, you need to learn how to sell your products. You need to be able to be in touch with customers. I did a TED Talk in 2016 here in Dayton. So if you Google TEDx 2016, you'll see a talk about think and act like your customer. So I did that. The second thing you have to do is you have to know your craft as well. So you have to, like I knew software, so I started a software company. So you need to, and you, by the way, you could start a construction company if you knew how, to build houses or buildings, etc. You need to have that combination of understanding your craft, and then you need to understand where problems that you can uniquely solve. Let's say you want to be an entrepreneur and you want to start up, a pizza business right across the street. Well, what you're gonna have to figure out how to do is get everyone to buy your pizzas instead of the one right across the street. What makes your pizza better than theirs? And in their mind, not in your mind. And so that was part of what I talked about, was thinking and acting like a customer. You have to understand what they want, and you have to put your bias aside because they're the ones buying it, not you. So those would be the big things. And the other thing is, yeah, like I say, yeah, being an entrepreneur, it doesn't happen everything overnight. My first 5 years were very, very rugged, just, hanging on to survive the first 5 years. And 95% of businesses fail because of cash flow problems at the beginning. So what I always recommend is, if you ever want to start your business, save up a year's salary so you can live without getting paid for a year, so you can manage cash flow, because you've got to put money to start your business. And then you expect every customer going to come to you right away. When I started my business, I actually worked for another software house, and I thought, oh, everybody's going to come to me right away. And they kind of said, no, we're going to wait. You got to prove yourself. So, you have to mentally be prepared for those things. Know a craft, know your business skills, and be prepared to hang on for your first, 3 to 5 years or so. Don't, don't have that get rich quick. We're going to make all our fortune on GameStop this week mentality to it. Okay.
What about Carol? And you may have already said this, but do you have anything more to add how Carol prepared you for college?
There was a teacher I had at Carroll that was sitting around talking to us one day, and he made a great point about college. When your first year or two at college, you take all these general ed classes, and a lot of people are like, "Oh, I want to take a general ed class. I want to be an engineer, or I want to go into this." But what you find is that by taking a lot of different classes, as he talked to us about, makes you well-rounded. And being well-rounded helps you actually in your career, because you can see the world from a wider lens versus a narrower lens. I've heard at some point that a large proportion of the Ohio State marching band are all engineering students. So, music and engineering, I mean, you look at it from a distance, say, how are those two related? But they actually complement each other, very, very well. So one of the other things I learned at Carroll, besides depth, was width. So, so when I started in college, I took classes in sociology, Eastern religions. I learned about Hinduism and Buddhism, for example, that was really, kind of fascinating, that helped me out. I took a class in problem solving in college, and some of the things I learned at Carroll really helped me on that. So, when you take your classes at Carroll, yeah, you got certain subjects you like and don't like. Some like math, some don't like math, some like political science, some like geography, history, etc. But learning those different things really, really helps out, and makes you more well-rounded. As I got older and I lived the American dream of what I was just talking about, we got a chance to travel. And so some of the things I learned at Carroll about, geography and history, you know, you know, I, I've had a chance to, I've been inside Parliament in in London, in the United Kingdom. We did a safari in Africa where we saw Lucy, the first human that we've discovered. We found the place where her remains were found. So, some of those things really pay off for you later, just to be curious in the world and use that curiosity to your benefit. Always ask, those questions of how and why and where and what, because they really do become fascinating and they help you out significantly. To the students, though, I'm always more than glad to ask further questions. I've lived the American dream, and some of that started, with a great education at Carroll High School. I'm very thankful for that. And so, use that education. And, my goal in life is help as many people as possible to be very successful. And don't hesitate if you ever have any more questions.
Thank you again. Thank you so much.